Hello, everyone. We are live on Coaching Conversations. Come on through. Come on through. Today is a special day. So I got my wine on today because it's a special day because I felt like it. So y'all come on through to Coaching Conversations. All right, let me turn this volume down. Hello, hello, hello. Come on through to Coaching Conversations. Just making up, improvising jingles as we get started on today. It's officially afternoon. Take a sip of my wine. Y'all say hey. Let me know who is present. Today is going to be an interactive show. I mean, it always is, but I really would love to see y'all's comments and participating in the conversation today. So y'all come through in the comments and let us know. Let us know who's watching. Let us know who's watching. Come on in. Coaching Conversations. And drop in the comments. Let us know you're watching. You hear a bit of static? Okay, thank you for letting me know. Okay, let's see. Is it better now? Let me know if it's better now. Come on into the comments. Let us know you're watching. Okay, and let me know if the static has gotten any better. It's still staticky? Okay, let me see. I've got my blue mic. So let me see. It might be better without it. Unfortunately. It was okay for a minute, but now it's back. And I wonder if it is the fountain that's in the back that we're picking up on. Y'all let me know. Is it static? Is it still going? Let me know. If it is, I'll unplug my mic. Sounds like a fan, okay. Okay, how about now? Okay, I guess it didn't like my microphone. That's all right. That's all right. Okay. Welcome y'all to Coaching Conversations. Thank you all for coming through. My name is Jamie Alilaw, and many of you know me as a professional opera singer. I'm also a leadership and life coach, and so I've decided to create this platform to have some conversations where we create space to talk about different topics that affect multiple people and, just kind of be of service and just to have a conversation. I mean, that's literally what we say coaching is. Coaching is a conversation um, for new possibilities. And so each week we bring a new topic that I personally think would be beneficial to all of us to expound upon and to expand. And so that's coaching conversations. And today I'm very excited about this conversation. Y'all, I'm excited about all of the conversations we have because I know some phenomenal people. And so I bring them on here to chat with me. Um, but today we are having a conversation with my girl, Brittani McNeill, about just really in general about the empowered voice. And this is very important to me because as a vocalist, as a vocal coach, as somebody who likes to talk, the voice is very essential. And I've found that culturally, um, in general, women are most challenged on our speaking, and especially Black women. And so for today's coaching conversation, um, it is my intention to specifically center the voices and the perspectives of Black women on this topic of the empowered voice. I welcome everyone to watch, to participate, and I welcome your comments in the comment section and to ask questions and to share reflections. Just know that this conversation in particular, I'm being very specific about approaching this from the perspective of a Black woman. I am a Black woman. My guest is a Black woman. And, a lot of the topics that have come up, especially, I mean, just they've always been around, right? But especially in the past couple of weeks, um, from my experience, center the challenges that Black women, especially, are experiencing with, our voices being stifled. And so, like I said, today's conversation, we are centering the Black woman's voice and the Black woman's experience. So, y'all come on through, check it out, participate from that perspective. And with actually from that perspective, I want to initiate a question for you all. I got fancy on the StreamYard, and they got these little banners. So I'm excited. What story do you have about being a Black woman that, though it's supported by facts, no longer serves you where you are going or what you intend to create? So that's a question for y'all in the comment sections to respond to. What's a story that you have about being a Black woman, whether you are a Black woman or whether it's a story that you have around Black women's experiences, a story that you find it might be true, but it's certainly not serving anybody. So go ahead and put that in the comment section. So now I am so excited to welcome, I say she's my new BFF. Okay. We met like a couple weeks ago or not a couple weeks, but like a couple months ago through the virtual colleague sphere, as we are both professional singers. And we became Facebook friends. And I was like, where have you been all of my life in this space? So I want to bring my girl, Brittani McNeill, into the stream. Hello, Brittani.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. I'm so happy to see you.
It's good to be here. I'm ready. I'm excited.
Excellent, excellent. So I have to give you the introduction. Okay, I like to introduce based off of who I've known someone to be, right? So beyond jobs and titles and all of that stuff, right? So I told y'all this is my new BFF, right? Because when when we met each other, when we connected around issues challenging the classical music sphere, especially as it relates to Black people, right? And so, you know, just seeing her comments on posts, I was like, okay. And then we would show up in different Zoom calls, and I was like, okay. And so I believe I jumped in her DMs and was like, sis, we're friends now. I'm following you. We are Facebook friends. And every day she drops a post and a perspective that I'm like, if everything in my stream looked like this with this tone, I would be flying high all day, every day, because it just looks like sense. It just looks like justice. It just looks like, truth and honesty and accountability. And I'm just like, yes, yes, yes. So that is who I've experienced Miss Brittany McNeill to be. She is direct. She is clear. She is accountability. She is joy and play. Okay. I mean, you know, she's my girl. So anyway, I've been so looking forward to this conversation. Brittany, thank you for being here.
I'm
Um,
glad to be here. Bear with
so
me, get this technical stuff together, but
you know what? Do what you got to do. And folks, I've got this little question at the bottom of the ticker that I invite you to answer in the bottom. What story do you have about being a Black woman that, though it may be supported by facts, it no longer serves you, it no longer serves where you are going, and it no longer serves what you intend to create? So I would love to see y'all interact with that in the comments. So, Brittany, do me a favor. I would love it if you were to introduce yourself to us all, just whatever you want us to know about who you are.
well, I think the most important thing for this conversation is exactly what you see, that I am a Black woman and I live at these intersections, right? Of being Black, of being a woman, of being, I mean, I am educated, so I have that privilege, but I come from a working class background, of all these different things. We all live at these different intersections and they absolutely affect how we live, how we see the world, how the world sees us. So I am a classical singer, an opera singer. I live in Baltimore. I have a background in journalism as well. So that's where I started. I started as a journalism major and found myself being like the only person who wasn't a music major, like in master classes and stuff. And so I was like, I think this is where I'm supposed to be. So I started out intending to do musical theater, and that's come full circle. I've been able to get back to that. But once I started with classical music, I just landed there. I think as many of us do. And so that's what I've been doing for a while now. I'm a mother of a Black girl child. And so that informs, how I operate in this world and the world that I want to create, for those who come after us. And yeah.
Tatanisha said, yes, I love that description of the intersections. So, I said earlier that, specific to this conversation, my intention is to center the voices of Black women and our experiences on this topic of the voice and the empowered voice. It's also my intention, I always come into these things intending to create space to have these conversations and to expound upon and to explore. Also to fill my own cup. And so I'm like, I hope y'all brought y'all cup to get full. But just, I mean, I always say these conversations, I would have these conversations if there was nobody watching. Like you and I will talk like this if nobody's watching. And also, I know that there's value in this. And I think that there is particular value in having two Black women speak from the perspective of Black women about the need for our voices to be empowered in every space that we occupy, right? So, Brittany, I would like for you to share, if any, what your intention would be for today's conversation.
So for me, I think Black women these conversations are, like you said, for us, but for everybody else. We have so much to say because we see so much, because so much is required of us, because so much is asked of us, right? And we put so much out into the world, I think because we want to, but also, right, because we have to. So for me, I want us to deal with how we speak, with not being afraid to speak, with not being afraid to advocate for ourselves with the same fervor with which we advocate for other folk, right? With not being afraid to save ourselves the way we save other folks, to preserve ourselves, to cover ourselves the way that we do those things for other people. And then in that, when we communicate, when we advocate for ourselves, when we put our needs on the table, when we demand reciprocity, not allowing other people to dictate how we do that, right? Because we have these unfair standards placed on us where we have to be very careful about not what we say, because people, it's not what we say, it's how we say it. But then is it? Or is it just that people don't like what we say? Or is it just that people don't want us to say anything? So that's what I'd like us to unpack, like let's deal with those things. Is there some truth in that it's not what you say, it's how you say it? But I found with Black women that it doesn't matter how we say it, it doesn't matter how we package it, it doesn't matter how soft we make it, it's never enough. It's never good enough. It's never. And so I just wonder, I know that the issue is not, how we say it, but the fact that we are speaking at all. Look at the recent, in pop culture, look at this recent thing with J. Cole and No Name. For him, this Black woman who was out here doing the work, right? She's doing it for everybody, not just for Black women. She's out here doing the work. She's out here trying to teach and uplift and learn herself and build and grow. And for a Black man to then call her out and say, oh, I want you to say it to me more nicely. I want you to take the time to say it the way I want you to say it. I need you to teach me because I don't know. Well, sir, that's what she was already doing. So let's unpack. Is the issue really that you want to be taught? Or is the issue just that at the end of the day, you're going to use whatever silencing and gaslighting tactic you can to get Black women to be quiet?
See, okay, this is the deal, right? Because you dive in. So I'm like, let's talk, right? Because when you say you want to unpack these things, you make a point that I have observed just from personal life and from looking at other people, right? Respectability. If I package it this way, if I make it look like this, like you said, we have education, right? We got these degrees, that should give us certain license. We put this together in a way that should give us certain license. Like we're doing all that whoever they are, right? Whoever makes these standards that keep shifting, we do whatever they say that we need to do that should give us license, right? And so then they come up with these responses, negative responses. They're triggered, right? If I say it this way, if I look this way, what was that you did with your head? What's them lips? Just all of these different things. And when in reality, like you said, the depth of the question is the challenge really the fact that I'm saying anything at all, right? Now that's day work. Right. When we talk about unpacking this, I love that you said you want us to talk about how we speak and how we advocate and our ability to do these same things for ourselves. And I feel that because we have spent so much time, energy, and focus trying to create this space for ourselves by our service really to others, what gives you the audacity to speak as you do when they don't like it?
They ain't gonna like it either way. So why would I not? How can I not? First of all, let me backtrack. I have learned, for one, that for me, there's always this pull to advocate for other folk, right? There's always this pull to advocate for other people, to make spaces virtual, physical, education, religious, whatever space I'm in, to make those spaces safe, to make those spaces loving, to make those spaces kind, which is different than nice. And in order to do that, I have learned that you have to learn how to advocate for yourself. That is where you get your practice. How can you advocate for other people if you're afraid to stand up for yourself? How can you call out what is wrong? How can you fix it? How can you even address it if you're afraid? And to me, I've always felt much more. I always tell people, I am not a person who likes conflict. I'm just a person who's not afraid of it. I'm not a person who likes confrontation. I'm just a person who's not afraid of it. And that feeling, that anxiety that I have when things are unresolved, when things are not right, when things, are not what we know they're supposed to be, to me, that pulls at me, and that's harder on me than actually saying something. That weight is going to be on me until I deal with this thing. And that's in my personal interactions, that's in my professional interactions, that's in group interactions. Coming from a journalism background, you learn almost immediately about media ethics, and you learn about interpersonal communication, and you learn all of these different things. And those things are geared towards getting a story. What can be missing, and maybe for the sake of the job, and that's probably one of the reasons that I don't work in journalism full time, is that compassion and the empathy and the need to dig in with not an angle for what you want to get out of it, but an angle for what you want to understand, and what you want an outcome to be. And so to me, it feels much worse not to deal with a thing than to deal with it. I don't like those passive aggressive communication styles. I don't like communication that doesn't lead to resolution. I don't like, or at least that where that's not the end goal. Because, and I want to clarify that to say, I don't think you have to have a solution to be able to engage in dialogue. So I want to be clear about that. But to me, it feels much worse to be sitting around with that heaviness and that weight than to just deal with the thing. But if you are clear about creating communities where you operate in love, and you operate in honesty, and you operate in kindness, then that shouldn't be an issue. The reason it's an issue is because people often give you back, or give to you, they perceive a thing from you based on what they're giving. So if you're not operating in honesty, and you're not operating in love, and you're not operating in kindness, you're going to assume I'm not either. And you're going to that energy. You're gonna make assumptions about how I'm coming to you and why I'm coming to you based on what you are putting out into the world. So when I know with a clear conscience what I'm putting into the world and what my end goals are, then I can speak freely. And I have a responsibility for how I speak, for what I say, for what my intentions are, and even for impact. But at the end of the day, I can't unpack all your stuff for you, right? I can't do that for you. I can try to help you. I can try to guide you. And I get to decide where my limits are in that work, right? But I get to have a voice, and you don't get to quiet that voice because it makes you uncomfortable.
See, okay, because I shared that meme that was going around that said, what's the difference between aggressive and assertive? And then the lady working across said, is your gender, right? And I've been talking with my therapist about this, right? This distinction, because this is, I, like you, am not a fan of um uh where are my words at? I'm not a fan of conflict, right? I'm not a fan of conflict. And really beyond that, it used to frighten me because I have very visceral responses, right? So it would literally feel like a vice on my heart to have conflict. And I was one who I can be very eloquent. So I can package things and fluff it. And, I was definitely one who ascribed to this notion of, let me say it the right way. And it was just after one too many interactions with somebody who was determined to have me as wrong, right? Where it's like, it doesn't matter how I fluff this, it doesn't matter what color, what fragrance I put on it, it doesn't matter. You are determined to have me as wrong. And also, what you just said, I am not responsible for your feelings in that sense, right? Like, and I think that that's oftentimes what women, we do take that responsibility, right? Oftentimes you'll hear women say things like, I feel guilty for saying no. I feel guilty. It's encased in this guilt. And so and I was talking to my therapist about it, and she says, what you're responding to is their reactions, right? And so when you say, when I know my heart, in essence, when it comes down to it, right? When I know my heart, when I know truth, when I know the intention, when I know that I am love, right? Like that's my being. So when I know that this is my being, and I know that that is the energy in which I send it out, those are all of the things that I'm responsible for. And when I am aligned in that, and it goes over there, right? Then we also have that responsibility when it comes over here. And then this can also become space for conversation and things of that nature. One thing you said earlier as well is being intentional about creating these spaces and communities of loving understanding. And so I think this is where challenge comes in, right? Because we're wanting that, right? We're wanting to create these spaces. And like I said, we get met sometimes with one whose intention is to just have me wrong because of his own shit over there, right? Like, and I say he because what's coming to mind right now is you talk about pop culture, right? So we're having this conversation about how Megan Thee Stallion went on live, and because of consistent pressure, like, we got to know what happened, why you ain't tell da, 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 da. She came out and she told her story, she told what happened. And just she's telling these stories to followers, to perceived fans, right? And I know this is not the same as having like complete safe environments, but it's like, I think one of the frustrations we have as Black women is who's supposed to be, who can I have a safe environment with if, my brother over here is calling me a liar, if he's mocking me being shot, if, this, that, and the other. It's like, how do we create these environments when we are challenged by these intersectional attacks?
So in that meme that you referenced, there should have been somebody turning around from a third chair to say, and race, because it's so interesting that we talked about intersections earlier, right? White women definitely face some issues and barriers in communication, but white women are always offered a place of safety, always offered a place of protection, right? That's why we talk about them weaponizing white tears, because they know that. I don't care how much of a feminist you are, that there is a space that offers you protection as a white woman, and that's why they weaponize it so often. I read something recently, and I'm going to share it hesitantly only because I cannot remember who wrote it, and I would like to properly credit them for it. But I'm going to share it anyway because I thought it was so powerful. And they talked about how we talk about violence from white women, and we call it fragility. We won't even name it as what it really is. And Black women are often on the receiving end of that violence. But here we go with the intersectionality, another conversation that we don't have. We talk about Black men being on the receiving end of that violence. And maybe we talk about it more because we believe that Black men's bodies are in more danger than Black women. We believe that, but it's not true. And so the violence that Black women face and the violence that we face physically and otherwise is erased, right? And so when we talk about gendered communication, we can't talk about that without race. We can't, because white women do have spaces in which they can voice their thoughts and their opinions, and those things may be diminished. Those things may be, ridiculed. Certainly they face those sexist things, absolutely. And they face misogyny. They face this hatred of women. But when you add that Blackness in, there's another level. And so we not only are silenced, but we face this very real violence from the state, from white people as individuals, from Black people as individuals within our community, right? So I think it's so important to unpack all of those things. When we talk about how does gender affect communication, we got to be real specific and talk about how does being Black and being a woman or being a non-man, affect communication, because that's a whole different ball game. We can't say a word without somebody checking our attitude, tone policing. If we're too quiet, that's the problem. We can't be quiet. We can't be shy. We can't be introverts. We can't be sensitive. We can't be. And that's really what it comes down to. We're not allowed to just be. You know what I'm saying? And so I feel like there's so much to unpack. We can go in so many different directions. I'll kind of let you guide me to what specific things you want to discuss. But I think the really important thing here, and I've had to do this for myself a lot, especially recently in white spaces and in Black spaces, but it's a different thing in both. But I think it's so important to highlight the fact that Black women have no safe space. To me, that's why it's so important to create them and to be vocal about that, because we don't have safe spaces. When will a day come? And I might say this again, because it's been on me so heavily recently. When will a day come when our voices are valued as much as our labor? When you're going to listen to us as much as you call on us to do work, as much as you call on us to uphold whatever your platform ideals, those things are. When you're going to listen to us in the beginning, so we don't have to come fix stuff later. And I think that probably resonates with a lot of women on many different levels, because we deal with this in our homes, we deal with this in our families, we deal with this in our romantic relationships, we deal with this with our coworkers, we deal with this as a community as well, as individuals and as community. Folk don't listen to us, but then they come back to us later and want us to fix things. They come back to us later and want us to make it better and make it right with no complaints, with no input. Just do what you got to do. Don't say too much. Just go ahead and do it, And it's not about anybody acknowledging, it's not about being right. But there is something important in the acknowledgement that Black women are smart, that Black women are thoughtful, that Black women are sensitive, that Black women have a worldview, that our voices matter, that our opinions matter. That's important.
I mean, and it's so funny because even just hearing you say those words right now, I felt them energetically, right? And so when we talk about creating these spaces and what it can look like, we know that there's no one, fix for anything, right? But as we have these conversations and we are becoming more present to all of the assaults and the violence that we are subjected to, right? I'm ready to transmute it. You know what I mean? In this way where we're talking about in this time of Black Lives Matter, everyone has our work, and the white folks' work is not the same as Black folks' work, right? Y'all got some stuff y'all got to do, and we have some stuff that we have to do. And so in this conversation around our empowered voices, right? There's some work that they have to do, right? In terms of acknowledging and honoring and just this willingness to see what is our work as Black women in getting back to our voices. And I mean like our unadulterated, just like raw, world changing boom, that voice. What is I just look and I see Marsha saying boom in the comments. Like what is that? What is our work in getting back in touch with that?
So first, let me say, like, white folk got their work, and we can talk about that because a reality is the majority of us go out into a world where we have to interact with white folk. But I firmly believe that if we focused on building community in Black spaces, we would not be so dependent upon what white folk do and don't do.
Mm-hmm.
Of the day, most of them aren't going to do anything that they don't see benefit in for them. Even this recent pull for equity and equality, diversity, inclusion, and all of those buzzwords, they very often gain more from that than we do. These organizations, these nonprofits, these companies, these whoever, they go out and they make money. The nonprofits, they're getting grant money to do programs that involve people of color. The companies are doing advertising that targets people of color. And so what happens is everybody's racking in millions of dollars just based on using us as props.
Mm.
So I always say, like, if you are in a white space and you have to get something done, someone taught me a while ago, you figure out how what you need fits into what they need, because that's how you're going to get it done. You make it clear to them that it benefits them as well. That's what's happening right now. We're able to put a little pressure on because of a number of things that are happening publicly. But at the end of the day, we can't make white folk do self-work. We can't make them do that. I think that is so important to know. We are talking about systems and we talk about institutions, and those things are super important. Addressing policies, addressing procedures, getting things written, absolutely dealing with laws and dealing with court precedent and all of those things, super important. But at the end of the day, you can't legislate anybody's heart. You can't do that. So we work and we fight to make these situations the best that we can. But I think if we focus more within our community on the ways that we interact with each other and the ways that we build each other up and the ways that we support each other. And to me, that's far more important. I'm so much more interested in community building with Black folk. The problem, though, is that if you are not Black and male and cisgender and heterosexual, that even within our community, your voice is not valued. You got folk within our community basically doing a Black version of All Lives Matter on us when we try to talk about the issues that Black women face, when we try to talk about the issues that trans Black women face, like when we try to talk about the issues that our queer brothers and sisters or civs face. That's a problem. Like we are all Black, and you can't All Lives Matter me when you are not doing the work. It's just like when we say, well, if Black lives matter, we wouldn't have to say it. If all lives really matter, we wouldn't have to say Black lives matter if you were actually addressing these issues. So it goes with us, and specifically with Black women. If the fact that domestic violence is one of the leading causes of death for Black women was being addressed, I wouldn't have to be sitting here talking to you. If the fact that the pay gap that exists between men and women goes even further when you begin to talk about Black women, if we were addressing that, I wouldn't have to be sitting here talking to you. And so I think as a community, we have to do a lot better with intersectionality. That's where, to me, the work starts, right? Black women can yell, can scream, can cry. We can do our own work, but we're not safe in our own communities. And so to me, I think, where does our work start? Our work starts with being bold enough to call that out, to understand it, to demand it, that we be safe within our own spaces. Because if I were to say, I ain't doing no more work for community, I'm just focusing only on Black women. When we start to say those things, people get angry. We're wrong, right? Okay, well, if that's not what you want, because we know Black women do the majority of labor in our community, if that's not what you want, how then you have to be willing to allow me to address the issues that I face every day. I have to be able to be safe in my community to do this work. My voice has to be valued. My safety has to be valued. My body has to be valued, you know? And so to me, Black women's work starts with understanding our own value and demanding that other people understand that. Demanding reciprocity. Demanding reciprocity in every situation. In your romantic relationships, that includes your husband, he owes you reciprocity. In your professional working relationships, that means you stop doing stuff you're not getting paid for. That means you stop putting yourself out there to do things that are not going to be beneficial to you professionally. You make it clear that you don't have to be perfect. You make it clear that you're allowed to be human, even in workspaces. That means in spaces where we volunteer and in spaces where we are going in to help, that we demand respect, that we demand safety. That means that we're not afraid to say that we are valuable, because we are. And it shouldn't be like some, like there shouldn't be anything negative attached to me saying that Black women are valuable. It shouldn't seem arrogant. It shouldn't seem, oh, you some kind of feminist. Or first of all, that's not an insult, but it shouldn't be that. Why do I have to be a feminist to believe that Black women are valuable, or a womanist? Or maybe we all need to be feminists and womanists, like if that's what it takes. But at the end of the day, like, to me, that's where that work starts, with being willing to set boundaries. And it's so hard to get specific about these issues when we're having this really broad conversation. But I think the work really starts in, like, us as individuals and in our communal spaces, starting to talk about what that looks like. It's not enough to say you got to set boundaries. What does that look like in your life? What does that look like in your house? What does that look like with your mama and your daddy, or your husband, or even your children, particularly, like if you have adult children, especially. But what even as a mom, though, as a parent of small children, you still get to have boundaries. You still get to have time for yourself. You still get to have safe spaces. Nobody gets to guilt you, about wanting to have social time. I see that so much with Black women. Oh, y'all want to go party on the weekends. So you got babies at home. Your babies should be asleep. Put them babies to sleep and go out with your girls. Put them babies to sleep and go out, whatever. And everybody's idea of social time is going to look different. Some folk do like to go to the club. So some folk might just want to go to a lounge and hear some music. Some folk might just want to go to a restaurant and eat a meal they didn't cook. Whatever. What do boundaries look like? Because for us, and we are classical musicians. We are opera singers. So we're going to have very specific ideas about what valuing ourselves and setting boundaries looks like in our world. And a lot of that is going to deal with white folk, right? But there are Black women who are stay-at-home moms. That's setting a boundary in and of itself, saying that I deserve to be a stay-at-home mom. You don't get to question that. I deserve to be at home raising my babies if I want to. My value is not just in how much income I bring into this household, because I bring so much more into this household. Black women have the right to say that. And I've seen so many women talk about how they've been made to feel guilty because they want to be at home with their children. Why do we think white children deserve to have stay-at-home mothers and Black children don't? Not that there's anything wrong with mamas who work. My mama worked. I've worked, but why do we believe that everything, that so many things that are good and valuable, that our children don't deserve them? That these privileges are only belonging to white people, and that trying to access those are wrong. No, Black women spent centuries as caretakers for white children, and you're gonna try to make Black women feel guilty for wanting to care for their own children in the same way. So that's why I say, we could never in an hour or so talk about all the specific ways in which Black women have to set boundaries. But like, girl, think about what that means for you. What does setting boundaries with your spouse look like? What does setting boundaries with your boss look like? What does demanding reciprocity look like? I was just recently in a white space, doing some work where I was not being respected and valued as a human being, as a person. And I had to say to myself, no, 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 no. You deserve to be human. You deserve to have life that happens outside of this space. And you deserve compassion when that happens. And I just said to someone the other day, I have been one to say this phrase, Black excellence. And I think we all say it because we love to see it. But Black folk ain't got to be excellent all the time. And this is especially true for Black women. You get to be human. You get to be tired. You get to be sad. You get to be fed up. You get to take time for yourself. You get to take space for yourself. You get to have life issues. You get to have conflicts. And not allowing people to stereotype you in a way where they try to make that as some inherent issue with you and your Blackness. When I'm in white spaces and I see how people respond to certain things, I'm looking to see, am I being treated in the same way that my non-Black colleagues are being treated? Am I being given the same space? Am I being given the same freedom? Am I being given the same compassion? To me, that's what setting boundaries and demanding reciprocity looks like. You know what I'm saying? If I have an issue, are you compassionate? Are you treating me as a person or a product? That's what I'm talking about. And so our work really does begin with like looking at our specific situations and deciding, one, I am valuable. Two, I get to set boundaries. Three, I get to demand reciprocity. And I'm not wrong for that. You know, I'm not going to be made to feel guilty for that.
We're now going to pass around the offering plates.
It all feels so general. None of it feels good enough, right? I don't even feel like, and this might also be because I always feel like I write better than I speak on the spot, but all of it feels so general, right? None of it feels like it's enough.
It's definitely a general conversation, right? Because we're here for an hour and some change, right? Talking on this huge topic, right? That our mamas and mamas mamas and mamas mamas have dealt with, right, for generations. So, but the thing is that this is another space. This is another digging down. This is the first time for many people even hearing this perspective. This is the first time for some Black women really being invited to prioritize the valuing of themselves as their platform from which they could even be called to serve anybody else, right? Because it's like what I heard you say, at the core of anything that we do is we've got to know our value, right? Because when we do this work and when we know our value, if I know who I am and then I go out and you talk or treat me in a way that is not me, then I'm able to reflect that thing back, right? And be like, oh, this isn't mine. This is yours. Here, let me give that back to you because that's not mine, right? But so often we not knowing our true value, but merely this value that has been attributed to us in as much as we have been able to serve someone else's agenda, right? That's how we've been walking around, with this half-assed description of ourselves and knowing and yearning for more. So even in just this conversation, this this space to just sit with this knowing that I am valuable beyond what I do. I'm valuable because I'm me.
Period.
And period. And that's the starting point, right? And then
Bare
you brought up
minimum,
this
yes.
and you brought up this conversation about safe spaces. And we have identified many of these spaces where we're not safe, right? And what I see opportunity for is for those of us who are newly discovering our value and our worthiness. It's like a child. It's like a baby, right? When you've got a baby fresh out in the world, you don't go and expose it to, all of these different environments that got these viruses and these germs and this. No, you keep that thing safe. You keep that baby safe until she has grown and built up the defenses, that she needs to then be able to sustain, right? Outside of that safe space. But until then, you don't let everybody come into your house. You're not going all over you're not going to parties when this baby is 5 days old. You know what I mean? And so I feel like there's opportunity for us as Black women, as those of us who are newly discovering our value, to say, sis, you need to be so covetous of this new seed of self, what, respect, self, this new seed of knowing and valuing of yourself. You need to be so protective of it that you don't expose it to those who would try to question it, whether that be another Black man or a Black woman with internalized, misogyny. You seek out those spaces. You only go and you only interact in those spaces that are going to be loving and nurturing and supportive of that seed of valuing you, right? And so it's a both and, right? There is this work because we love and because we value our community. You say this often on your posts and in conversations. We're not throwing folks away. And you might not you might not get entree into my home and space if you are a threat to my being and to my establishing of my knowing of my value. Because I believe that when we are established on that, when that's our bare minimum, then you have no choice but to respect me. Like you said, I can't force you to do your work over there. But know this, you don't even get access. You can't even operate in my sphere. You can't vibrate in my sphere without knowing me to be valuable. Even if it's a grudging thing, even if it's, you begrudgingly see me as valuable, because that's just who I am. That's who I show up as. I wanted to
Stay there. No. Stay right there.
Okay, yes, ma'am.
You don't have to like it. You don't have to like it. You gonna respect me. And I think one thing that I wish I would have brought up earlier is I understand that it doesn't always feel like you can do that, right? Because what if I lose my marriage, my relationship, my job, my family, my what if I lose? But I would offer that there's much more to lose if you don't do this work. Because what if you lose your sanity? What if you lose so many years of your life to sadness, depression? What if you lose your health, mental and physical, because of all this weight you're carrying? Like, what if you lose all that? And those things are not always like those tangible things or those things that are present in front of us. And so they often don't seem as important. But I offer to anybody who happens to come across this that it's more important. And it defines everything else in your life. I've been on this wave recently of I was going to write about this, and I probably will later. I think we need to start asking folk, when are you going to support Black women in public? When are you going to hold up Black women in public? My inbox stay popping. My text messages, my Facebook stay popping. But with folk who won't say a lot of this stuff publicly, I have been pulled to the side in person by people to say, I just want to tell you how much I appreciate you saying that, how much that spoke to me, how much that resonated with me, right? Which is fine. Love it. Want to know that I'm doing things to impact folk. I want to know that what I'm saying is resonating or is opening eyes or opening hearts or even just making folk feel better for a minute, right? But at some point, you got to support Black women publicly, particularly when we are taking risks on your behalf or on behalf of the greater good. You got to say to me publicly, sis, I appreciate you. You got to say to other folk publicly, this woman did a thing that helps us, or this woman said a thing that we need to hear, or this woman sacrificed a thing and we need to be aware of that, or we need to support her, or we need to sow into her life. And so to me, I've really been, I've been struggling, to be honest, because I've been thinking about this in my personal relationships, in my friendships. Do you support me publicly or just privately? If some shit go down, are you gonna have my back, or are you gonna watch them try to eat me alive? And that's huge. But to me, I think it's so unfair for us to sit back. You asked me, like, how do you decide to be a certain? How do you? I think it's so unfair to sit back and watch the same people sacrifice themselves over and over and over and over and over in different spaces, right? And because I know what that feels like, it makes me want to speak up even more because I understand what that feels like. I understand what it's like to look at folk, who you know personally, who are operating in the same spaces as you and are quiet as you fight battles that they should be fighting with you. I know what that feels like. I know what it feels like to go into Black spaces, to advocate for Black people and to be hated for that. I know what that feels like. And so for me, that's why the work continues, because I know I don't want anybody else to feel that feeling. I don't want anybody else to go through that. And folks are going to, but what role do I play? And so I think it's so important to say, you don't have to like me. That's fine. You're going to have to ask yourself why you don't like me. Am I saying something that's wrong? Am I doing something that's wrong? Am I advocating for something that's wrong? Or do you just want me to be quiet? Mm-hmm. Martin Luther King talks in a letter from a Birmingham jail about the difference between positive peace and negative peace. And this is something that I share in white spaces a lot, because white people are often tone policing, and white people are often, well, those protesters blocked the street and, I was all for their cause until. But we see that in our spaces too, where people swear they down for you until you do something they don't like, until you inconvenience them, until you challenge them. And so for me, I'm saying to myself and to others, but let me emphasize to myself, folk ain't gotta like it. They gonna respect me. Crazy to me. You do whatever you want to do when I'm not around. That's fine, but you're not gonna talk crazy to me in this space, in any space that I control, including my literal, physical space. You're not gonna talk crazy to me. You're not gonna disrespect me. And if me saying that, whether I say it like this or whether I say it like this, me saying that is a problem, you can remove yourself from my space, or I can remove you from my space, right? But I'm not going to go crazy. I'm not going to have sleepless nights. I'm not going to have high blood pressure. I'm not going to die at 50, God willing. I'm not going to be out here working my ass off. And that's physical, but that's also so much emotional. So much emotional. You brought up Meg Thee Stallion earlier. That girl got shot with a gun and with bullets. And decided if I report this, I endanger maybe myself, but certainly the Black men around me. If the police show up and he has a gun, they might kill him. Not even thinking, oh, but he could have killed me. And so I am, I'm full on abolish the police. And when I say abolish, that's absolutely what I mean. I don't just mean defund. I mean abolish. But Black women are forced to work within the systems that we have. I am a firm believer of not calling the cops on folk. Firm believer of that. So we want to talk about specifics. Let's get specific. Firm believer in not calling the cops on people, especially for petty stuff. But I'm also a firm believer that Black women do not have to lay down our lives, our safety for the value of community, because community should include our lives and our safety. So what that means is if another person is endangering me and I am in imminent danger, yes, I'm going to work with the system I have within the confines that are here to make sure that in a moment I am protected. Now, if you know that somebody's having a mental health crisis, that's a different conversation. If your city or your town has resources to deal with that, I think we all need to do the work to start finding out what those alternatives may be. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about when you are facing a real threat to your safety. Black women should not have to and should not be told to sacrifice ourselves or our children because Black people, specifically Black men, face violence at the hands of the state. It is not my job to put my body on the line and to make myself a barrier between the state and Black men who are doing the wrong thing.
Against me.
In protest, if I want to go out and do those things, if Black women want to go do, that's a different thing. But sis, it ain't your job to put your body on the line for somebody who is already putting that body in danger. That is not our job. It should not be asked of us. And what is happening is we're seeing Black women do it to ourselves and also to our children. Stop. Because you have a responsibility to take care of yourself first. No, let me backtrack. Actually, you know what? No, I'm going to leave it there. Because how are you going to take care of the babies if you don't take care of yourself? You have a responsibility to protect your children, if you have them, to protect yourself. And the imminent danger lies in those like very specific situations. When you have gotten yourself to a place of safety, sit with yourself, sit with different readings, get with scholarly research, get with books, get with authors, get with whoever you need to get with and with your therapist. Do all that work when you are safe. When you are safe, then you can think about the violence that a Black man faces at the hand of the state. When you are safe, then you can worry about those things. But when you are in imminent danger, it ain't your job to protect the folk who are endangering you. And so often we are put in a position to protect folks who are endangering us, to protect folks who won't protect us, to protect folks who, it's one, like reciprocity is one thing, right? But this goes even beyond that because we talking about folk who brought danger to us first. And now I'm supposed to go out of my way to protect you? No. And folks are calling her a snitch, calling her, all these things and making her out to be wrong. And I say again that Black women, and we could have another conversation about tall Black women, about full-figured Black women, about fat Black women, about Black women who don't fit whatever beauty standards, we are supposed to. How do you respond to Black women that you're not attracted to? How do you respond to Black? That's why I don't even like it, the misgendering of Black women. It's not funny. I don't care if it's a woman you don't like. It's not funny because when you do that and you take away our femininity and you take away our womanhood, then you take away those layers of protection that we should be afforded as women, that white women are afforded, that other women of other races are afforded, that we are not. Because people are always trying to make it seem as if we're masculine, as if we're hard, as if we're tough. We're women and we deserve to have voices and opinions, but also we face barriers as women and as Black women. So we deserve folk to protect us and to see us as folk who deserve these same protections that other women demand. I feel like I was just all over the place. I said a lot.
This because you said we can have another conversation, and I wrote it down because we will have another conversation. We will have another conversation. And I was on your post and you try to head it off at the top, like, and don't come to me talking about when am I gonna write my book, because that's I was like, so when are we gonna have the book released? Because this is the thing, I'm looking through the comments, right? And it's just like, speak, boom, oh yeesh, period. I'm valuable because I'm me. Yes, right? Like,
yes,
my girl, newly discovered. It's the stripping of old and healthy to welcome the new, right? So, this conversation is powerful. Exactly, publicly. I mean, that whole word about, doing it in public. I mean, I just did I just shared a post on that because it is work, right? It is work. And you coming and telling me after the fact, what you're telling me is that you're riding on my coattails. And so you're making things even heavier, right? But, this conversation is a broad conversation, right? Because I came into this talking about the voice because, as I reflected back to you when I asked you to do this, my mission in life is to empower Black women so that we can change the world, right? Because I believe that we have the power to do so, right? And so I came to you on this topic because the power of life and death are in the tongue, right? And so that we have been suppressed so intentionally from speaking out truth, right? Is a real thing. This is not a one thing. This is not a one hitter.
It's not. It's so much.
This is so much. This is so much. And I asked that question. I'm gonna scroll back up because I asked the question about these stories that we have operated in, these contexts that we have participated with oftentimes that are no longer serving us. And Ibukun said, I used to believe that I needed to work 2, 3 times, 100 times harder to be excellent and undeniable in order to be taken seriously and to be respected, until I completely exhausted myself. And still they weren't checking for me.
They weren't checking
right?
for me. And
So
they ain't gonna check for you unless it's inherently in them to do so. And Jamie, you said earlier, whoever them is, it often feels like Black women against the world. Let me change that around. It often feels like the world against Black women, right? This idea of Black excellence has become, I hate to say it, but almost toxic.
Yeah.
Because it sets, look, we were all taught you got to be 2 times or 10 times or 100 times as good as the next, right? Because you're Black. And we know, even though that's a harmful ideology, we have known it to be true. But I think it's time that we change that narrative. And I think it's time that we say, no, we get to be human. No, we get to be, I just had a situation where, I had to say to someone, you've made assumptions about me. You've made assumptions about my life. You've made assumptions about, different things it can be the most basic stuff. It can be the most basic stuff. And there will be all of these assumptions about who you are and what you're doing. Let me go there. I'm gonna get personal. So I just moved, right? I live in Baltimore. I just moved. Real basic move, right? Just moving about 10 minutes across town. It's, nothing. I moved and my apartment wasn't ready because the apartment there was a leak in the ceiling, and they fixed the leak. But when it was time for me to move in, they realized that it had damaged the floor to the point where they wanted to put in a new floor. Great, fine, put in a new floor. I'm a new tenant. Hey. But what they did was they waited, and they did it at the last minute, but also the communication wasn't great. So I was coming, I was supposed to be doing a show, or not a show, a recording that required some in-person work in the time of COVID-19, and had to miss something because had to get my housing stuff straight. I was out of town at the time, coming back to the city where I live with no housing, with no place to live, right? When I relayed this to the person I was working with, I was met with all of these accusations about my professionalism and assumptions about, I don't think you're telling me the whole story. And is there something deeper going on in your life? And all of these assumptions from a person who works at a company that provides housing for artists all the time. So what you really could have done was just said, I'm so sorry. Are you okay? Can I help? None of those things. I know in my head and my heart that if I was a white artist, the only thing you would have said is, how can I help make you comfortable so that you can get to this work? But instead, there were all these assumptions and straight out accusations that I wasn't telling the truth, that there had to be something deeper happening. Well, if you want to share with me, if you want to, I'm here as a friend. Why all these assumptions? Why does there have to be some deep traumatic experience? Why can't I just have regular life shit like anybody else? Sometimes the best laid plans just don't go the way we planned them. I planned to move in on a certain day and have it go a certain way, and that didn't happen because I don't control everything in this world. Another conversation we could have on another day. And so I, in that white space, progressive white space, and this is why I tell people all the time, I don't care how progressive a white space is, because white people believe this shit in theory, but they don't act on it, right? They believe all these progressive and liberal ideas in theory. They like even the academic nature of it. They're fine with panels, and they're fine with conversations, and they're fine, with grants and obviously, the money that comes in to do things surrounding this work. But that does not make them look at you or treat you like a human being. And so I had to call it out. Now I could have said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I just want to make it right." No. I said, you know what? I don't have control over these things. Sometimes a thing takes precedence over work, right? We can still get this project done, but I am not going to apologize for making sure that I have a place to sleep tonight in the middle of a pandemic, right? I'm not going to apologize for that. I'm not going to apologize for making sure that all of my shit is in order for my home, a home that I will bring my child into. I'm not going to apologize to you for that, because this may be a workspace, but I am a person. And if I were white in this space, you would treat me as a human, not as some, something, some entity, some whatever that you have to try to figure out or work on. I didn't ask you for anything, which is good because you ain't offer shit except to be in my business. Because what you could have offered as a person in power, as a person who has access to donors, as a person, you could have said to me, "Hey, I know it's a pandemic, but would you like me to reach out to a donor and see if we can get you temporary housing as we would our artists who come in from out of town?" And I may or may not have accepted that because it's a pandemic. The issue wasn't that I needed help. I was handling my shit. The issue was that you made all of these assumptions about what was happening in my life, that it had to be some traumatic event. I don't know if he assumed I don't know what he assumed. I don't know if it was an assumption that it was some stuff in my personal life or my financial life or what it was. But I do know that there were many assumptions made and many requests for more information after I'd given all that I could give. But there was no handout. And by handout, I mean like gesture, not handout, a tangible thing, to see if I was okay. If you really thought it was something deeper than I was saying to you, why would you not be asking about my well-being? So I had to, in that space, call that thing out, which is why I tell people all the time, believe me, I practice what I preach. I don't just say this stuff so people have to go into difficult situations where I'm not there to help, you walk through your shit and like, are you going to help me and my family? Are you going to, help me get my check? No, I do this in my own life. And when I presented it, here we go with, I want to ask, what's the worst that can happen if you do advocate for yourself? And what's the worst that can happen if you don't advocate for yourself? And I think the answer to the second question for me is always more important. And so, of course, when I called these things out, what happened? Gaslighting. Oh, I didn't into, or I wasn't doing, and so you know what? I called that out too. I said, you're gaslighting me. You didn't treat me like a human. Why can't I just be a human? Why can't I just be a person that stuff happens to? And it doesn't have to immediately call into question my professionalism or my personal life or some bigger thing way beyond. Nothing was wrong. A thing happened. And so we should be able to demand that respect in any space that we're in.
Okay, are we back? I think that was my internet just went crazy for a second. You can hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Okay, yes, we're back. I'm sorry, my internet just,
just
acted up for a second.
Technology. Oh, I think I'm losing you again though. Are you there?
I'm here. Okay, I'm like, let me see if we see it. But yes, I definitely hear you saying that, normalize calling it out, right? That this
normalize that, yes.
I mean, just reflect that thing right on back, right? Because oftentimes I feel like we will oftentimes, because we know we're going to be challenged, right? We will question ourselves, like, okay, am I seeing and experiencing what I think I'm seeing and experiencing?
Yes, you are.
You are, right?
Every time.
That goes with the valuing ourselves, right? I mean, really, that's it too, right? Us valuing our own voices, right? Us knowing that my voice is important, that it is important for me to speak out, that my voice does have power in my own life and beyond, right? So that I must speak to advocate for myself in order to bring about the transformation or to bring about the ending that I desire. Right now is going out. Okay, sis is getting tired. She over here like, okay, listen. I'm so mad at that.
She said, look, you've been working for an hour. Can you?
she said, wrap it up. Listen, ma'am. That I'm so mad because I'm looking at these comments. We were getting it in. Who was this? This is from way back.
And let me jump on what you just said. To see the change that you want to see. For me, this just happened recently, right? And I shared that. It's a personal story, but it don't even feel personal because it was so absurd, And I have folk who I can check in with too, right? I got people who I can check in with and be like, okay, just give me your honest, like, girl, you wildin', or nah, girl, they wildin'. So I have folk I can check in, and I share that story because for me, it wasn't just about that particular situation or that gig or that company or that person, right? A space in which, let me say, I've offered a lot in that space. I've offered education in that space. I've offered free time, volunteer. I've offered administrative work. I've offered a lot in that space. The reason I advocated for myself wasn't just for me, because honestly, I could have been like, fuck all of this. Like, I don't need this. I advocated in that space because my thought was, if I remain in this space or if I don't, other Black people are going to come into this space. It's going to be a safe space for them to come into, right? I can't make it a safe space because it's not my space to make into anything. But what I can do is influence how folk are dealt with in the future. And what I can call out are these prejudices that I know exist within you, which cause you to see me in a certain way, in spite of how smart you know that I am, in spite of me doing good work on many fronts as a performer and on other fronts in the past, in spite of me being a friend, being a good peer or colleague, in spite of the history, right? You still don't see me as a person the way you see yourself. And I often say white folk really, especially with Black women, often see us like as entertainment or as pets, as anything other than humans like them, right? There are things, we are to them these things there to provide them with like entertainment, maybe with comfort, maybe like some sage advice here and there.
Spirit animals.
Yeah, girl. That's cool. I got so many thoughts on that. But right? And then at the same time, they see us as these things that they need to guide or help or mold, or we have the potential and they can make us into this great thing, or they can give and often I think because we talk about white folk making space for us, that they think they're doing us a favor. And I say this often, when you go into these spaces, particularly if you go into these spaces and you're doing work, like you're just doing regular work, somebody is paying you to do a job, operate as such. They are not doing you a favor. You are offering a service or a product and they are paying you for it. And that is it. They are not doing you any favors by doing so. But even more so, if you are going into a space and you are doing work surrounding race, equity, diversity, any kind of volunteer stuff, any kind of building, any kind of strategic planning, and you are doing that shit for free, then you better know that you are doing them a favor. White people are not doing you a favor by talking about race, by talking about gender, by talking about, issues that they need to fix. You are doing them a favor by helping them fix it because it is their shit to fix. I know I'm comfortable now because I'm cussing. It is theirs to fix, and you are there doing a work for a greater good. That doesn't mean I need a pat on the back every second, but it does mean that you're going to respect and value me as a person. You're going to respect and value my opinion. You've invited me to do this work, or you've asked me to do this work. And you know that you can't do it without me. And by me, I don't necessarily mean me as an individual. I mean us. And so I am doing your work for you. I'm helping you do this work. You're going to value me. Same thing within community. Same thing within building Black spaces. You're going to value my voice. I know what I have to offer. I think that is a big thing. A Black woman said to me recently, like, I don't know if I would be, qualified to do this thing. I asked about doing something, about taking on a task. And I said, I asked you to do it because you brought these ideas forth, because you brought this information forth. Why wouldn't you be qualified? Who would be more qualified? Why wouldn't you feel qualified? And I think that's a huge thing. Of course you're qualified. And what would make anybody else more qualified? You're interested. you have knowledge, you have experience, you're qualified. And nobody else gets to tell you that you aren't, you know? And I think that's a big part of why we're so afraid to speak up on behalf of ourselves and others very often is that we don't feel like we're qualified. White folk, especially white men, ain't ever waited to be qualified for a damn thing. We got a president who ain't qualified, and he has no problem sitting up in that White House that we built. So who gets to tell you that you're not qualified? Who gets to tell you that you're not valuable? You know? And so when I'm out here telling folks to go into their spaces and advocate for themselves, I'm doing that work for myself. And I want to be clear about that. I'm not out here trying to be a hypocrite. I'm not out here trying to get folks into situations that I can't get them out of. I'm telling you that there is something more important. You know, often there's a bigger picture that is more important than whatever thing you think is on the line. And very often, especially when you're dealing with folk who communicate typically in passive aggressive ways or who like to do roundabouts on stuff, when you get direct with people and you directly challenge them or you directly call a thing as it is, they ain't got no choice but to go there with you. They don't get to control the narrative anymore. That is one of the reasons that I am assertive and clear in how I speak. I was just telling someone recently, we have to know the difference between attacking people and challenging ideas. There is a difference between attacking a person and challenging an idea. If you are so attached to your ideas that everything someone says to challenge them feels personal to you, you got to do that work on your own.
That's the place to look.
I cannot do it for you. But you don't get to tell me or anyone else that they are wrong, that they are mean, that they are aggressive, that they are attacking because they challenge your ideas. No, 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 no. All of our ideas should be challenged. And if your ideas can stand, defend them. If they're valuable, defend them. Your value as a person is not in those ideas. So if the ideas stand on their own, defend them. If they don't, be willing to let them go. Be willing to rethink them. Be willing to grow. Be willing to challenge yourself. Be willing to be better for your own sake and the sake of other people. Don't walk into situations being defensive. And so for me, I cannot make people like me. I can't do that. So I'll be honest, assertive communication is not necessarily going to make you likable. But what it will do is it will keep people from being able to twist your words. It will keep people from being able to talk around the things you're bringing forth. It will keep people from being able to ignore you. And it will keep people from being able to attack your character. Because then you can point to the clear and direct things that you said. And you can always take situations back to ideas, right? Back to these thoughts so that you can call folk on what they are saying and you can make them clarify what they are saying so that you don't have confusion, right? Because a lot of these interpersonal issues come in this roundabout passive aggressive communication where things are left to kind of be figured out by anybody who's involved or watching. Clear communication cuts all that out. You can't say I said anything I didn't say. And I'm going to make you clarify what you are saying. So either you got to back your shit up or you're going to change your mind.
And what I hear for those of us who are building our direct assertive communication is that when we build and establish that self-value, then it allows us to release this need to be liked. Because that is oftentimes the biggest thing in the way of us really embracing and pursuing our desires and our desired outcomes. Is this fear of being challenged and this fear of not being liked. But when my value is so established and that is a value of my being and my speaking, when that is so established, then any any narrative running counter than that is a falsehood.
Right.
And the likability is just not even a question, because I don't need you to like me.
And you're going to find your people. You'll find your people will find you.
We're talking
People
about
ask me sometimes, how do you go? How do you go into these spaces and you're not worried about? And I say, when I go into these spaces, and when I say these spaces, I really mean like any space. I don't have to be afraid because people already know who I am. So if you invited me into a space, you do so knowing who I am. A lot of times folks sit in spaces and there's so much internal conflict and fear, and very real and valid fear, because you want to say a thing, you want to be yourself, you want to challenge certain ideas, and you can't because you put up this facade. And let me say that I'm not necessarily criticizing that, because we all have, myself included. Sometimes you either put up a facade or you hide things, one or the other. And sometimes like not showing all your cards is necessary, right? So I'm not shooting that down entirely. But what I am saying is that when you are yourself and you are invited into spaces where you are welcome. That does not mean that you're never going to have challenges, because I just shared a personal story in which folk, did not treat me as a human, did not treat me with respect, did not give me the compassion that I deserve just as a person. But when I go into those spaces, people already know where I stand, right? When I create spaces, people already know where I stand. So if you come over here, it ain't gonna be no anti-Blackness, internalized or otherwise. It ain't gonna be no classism. I don't care about you elite Blacks. It ain't gonna be no homophobia. It ain't gonna be no transphobia. It ain't gonna be no queerphobia. I'm gonna use Ebonics, AAVE, whatever else. I got a whole degree in journalism. I don't need to prove myself to nobody. I am who I am. When I come into this space, you know what I value, you know what I accept, you know what I bring to the table. Now, I do try to make it clear that don't have nothing to do with professionalism. Obviously, if I got to go into a space where AAVE don't work, I know how to, I respect folk who don't code switch ever. I respect that. I do in certain situations. But I think I have even more respect for people who don't, who are like, you know what I'm saying? If our language can become pop culture, if they want to try to advertise it and make it theirs, then you're not going to tell me that it's less than when I use it, right? So even down to those small things, but more so not just about the way I carry myself, because we can all put up a front and a facade. I can be very professional. I can be very relaxed. Not to say relaxed ain't professional, so I shouldn't be clear about that. But I can be, I can show different sides in different spaces. If you call on me to speak or to host a panel or to sing, obviously classical music is a very serious, whatever. And we got to do in those spaces, right? But where I stand, where my ideas are, where my ideals are, where my conscience is, where my heart is, I'm laying that out on the line so that I don't have to worry about being in these spaces and somebody figuring me out. If you're honest about who you are, then you will be invited into spaces where who you are is welcome. And you ain't got to worry about being in spaces where you got to hide and cower and cover and worry. And why? That's okay. I don't need to be at every table. I don't need a seat at every table, because sometimes when folks are serving ain't for me. So that's fine. I don't need to be there. I only need to be in spaces where I'm going to be valued fully as a whole person for what I bring to the table. Everybody ain't got to like it. Everybody ain't got to want it. That's fine. I've grown to a point where I fear being in spaces where I'm uncomfortable and I'm not valued and I am sad and depressed and lonely and hurt and broken. I fear that far more than I fear people knowing who I really am. Because I like me. And maybe that's work people got to do too. Like, do you like you? Are you a kind person? Are you a loving person? Are you a genuine person? And I come across folk that I read immediately who are not those things. And I see you and I know. And that's not to be like on some fake deep shit. Like, that's me telling you that I know myself enough and my discernment knows enough that I see you and I see right through you immediately. And that don't mean I'm gonna throw you away. That just means I know how to operate with you, right? But I am confident enough in myself, not just my intellect, because that's not what it's about. We all have varying degrees of smarts, of talent in different areas of, like, all that shit don't matter, because those are the things that make us individuals, and all of those things are perfect as they are. What I'm talking about is my character, my heart, my being, how I love folk, how I love on folk, how I support folk and stand with folk. And those folk gotta include groups that I'm not a part of. I ain't rooting for everybody Black. I've said that recently. I ain't rooting for everybody Black, because everybody Black ain't rooting for everybody Black. So I'm not rooting for you if you're homophobic. I'm not rooting for you if you're transphobic. I'm not rooting for you if you're classist. I'm not rooting for you if you think that your degrees make you better than somebody else. I'm not rooting for you if $600 a week to some folk who are in the middle of a pandemic bothers you because you think they don't deserve it. I'm not rooting for you. I'm rooting for them. I'm rooting for the least of these. I'm rooting for the folk who need somebody to root for them. And if you can't do that with me, I'm not rooting for you. And so know that about me before you invite me into your space. Know that if you're holding on to some of this bullshit, that we might need to talk through some stuff so that we can be on the same team. But like you said earlier, Jamie, I'm also not throwing folk away. And there are obviously some folk who got to be thrown away. It gets egregious, you know, but I'm not throwing folk away. Challenging you does not mean I'm throwing you away. It doesn't mean I hate you. It doesn't even necessarily mean that I don't like you. I've come across people whose personalities that I felt like, man, we could click, but you got to unpack some of that stuff first, right? And other people may come across me and feel the same way. We can do that work together to build professional and personal relationships. But we gonna do this work, or I just don't need to be in that space. And I've become comfortable with knowing that I don't need to be in every space. That's okay.
Well, I'm gonna tell you, I know you, which is why I invited you to be in this space, right? Because we got, let me see. Doc Tiffany said, this is helping me. Thank you. Ibukun said, right, you can't tell me about me when I know me.
Come on, that's good.
Shanae said, damn, say it, Brittany. All of it. Just go ahead and say it, right? Because I too, yes, let's work together.
Let's work together. Yes.
And so this is my desire. This is my aim. And this conversation, like you said, it's been so broad. We've touched on so many topics. But at the core of it is this conversation that, let me see. Hold on. This is my mama right here. So, mama asked a question I got to get to. She says, Jamie, I want to know her work. What all she does. Like, listen,
hey,
listen. Thank you, mama, for asking this question, because it does. Because, it's funny because I've been doing these shows since April, and I do them because I know y'all see. I'm like, look, y'all, I know some dynamic people that y'all need to hear. Like, y'all need to hear this stuff, right? And I had a friend on not too long ago, and I'm starting to see some of the people on my network sharing her posts. And I'm like, oh, how do you know? And then I'm like, oh, you got connected to her from watching this coaching conversation. So that brings me to, it's up to you. Like, how can people follow you or be in touch with, what you got going on? What work do you do, and how can people follow you?
So you can, I have just my personal page on Facebook is open, it's public. You can follow it or you can friend me, right? I mean, either way. And I debated on that for a long time. Do I need to shut this down? I have said some stuff on this page over the years, right? But it all came back to what I just said for me. This is like who I am. right? And if I can't be in a space and be who I am, I just don't need to be there, you know? So that is what it is. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram. It's probably more of the same stuff. And right now, well, it's, COVID. So I ain't doing much of not nearly enough. I keep telling people I am far more busy right now than I should be based on what is going into my bank accounts. But as far as the work I do, like I'm an opera singer. I am a freelance writer. I do have a degree in journalism, but I ended up pursuing music full time and letting be that. So I live in Baltimore, and I do have some things in the works, but I don't want to say any names. But I will say that if you'll follow me on Facebook, that soon I will drop the so-called fan. I don't even want to say fan page because that's not what it is, but I will drop the name of the place where I will share like this kind of stuff on a regular basis, and it will be separate from my like personal stuff. But I mean, Jamie, you said it, like this conversation, this is the stuff we do every day on social media. Like this is, these are the conversations we have. I think this is why if I go listen for 3 days or something on social media, I end up coming back, even though there's such a peace sometimes with being separated from the social apps and all of that. But I come back because like that's where we connect. And this is like, the work. People often try to downplay the work that is done through social media channels. And I want to say to folk, you may not, especially during a pandemic, but in general, it may not be your work to go run the street, like literally pound the pavement. That might not be your work. You may have obligations, disabilities, fears, and those are valid, that keep you from being the person who is at every protest or being a person who is on the front lines of every battle, literally or figuratively. But we have these virtual spaces and they matter. As somebody who is a writer and as somebody who has a background in journalism, like, yes, we all have our issues with the mainstream media or the press or whatever that may be, but we know that these mediums are so important and they broaden over the years because having these spaces where we have these conversations, that changes minds, it changes hearts. You teach people, you enlighten people, you help people to grow. Everybody ain't gonna respond. Sometimes people read the stuff you say and they just sit with it. And so you got to know that and feel valuable in that. Sometimes I'll write something that I know is really real and it might get 5 likes. Sometimes I'll write something and it goes viral and it's shared by hundreds of thousands of people. Either way, I meant what I said. Either way, what I said had value, and either way, it was made available to the same people, and folk can sit with it and do with it as they please. So, what I do in my everyday life, other than being a mama, is I sing. That's what I do full time, and obviously, I do this work. Like I'm always doing diversity. Oh, what a word! And inclusion and equity and all of this work and teaching folk. And sometimes I get paid, and sometimes, maybe too many times, I'm doing it for free, or I'm volunteering, or I'm serving on a board, or I'm doing this or that. And so, but I say that to say there are spaces for other folk to get involved. Find your space. Find local organizations. Find space in your school. Find space at your job. Create the space if it's not there. Go to your student government association and say, I want to create this organization. Go to your HR or your boss or your company and say, this work is not being done here, and I want to see it done. For those of y'all who are in the classical music world, when you work in these companies, hold them accountable. Hold them accountable. They're on Instagram telling you how much Black Lives Matter, make them walk that thing out. And if you have the time, and if you have the space, and if you have the energy to be a part of it, then volunteer to be a part of it. Get engaged. Get engaged in the organizations in your field or in your area or in your community whatever those communities look like that help you do this work. You know, I stay busy because I'm always doing this work. And that looks different in different spaces. But what I do is I always try to come back to Black spaces to replenish, because doing it in white spaces is exhausting. So I always try to come back and do it in Black spaces. Number one, because I think that's more important. And I feel like that's where my time is better spent. But number two, because the work is heavy in both spaces. But when you create a community that doesn't look like the things that we so often imitate white spaces and imitate white communities, and we do things the way they do them. So that comes with so much baggage, and it comes with passive aggressiveness, and it comes with bad intentions, and it comes with, you know, mistrust and all of these weighted things. And it comes with gatekeeping and hierarchy and all of this shit where people ain't really trying to do work. They just trying to get enough status so somebody will see them and think they are the one and think they are the people to put the people into place. I don't want none of that. Like, I don't care about any of that. And so if you see me out here, like, I promise you, me as an individual is exactly what you see on here. And that which means that if you don't like what you see on here, then I'm not. And that's okay. That's all right.
Listen, so first of all, thank you so much for coming and doing this. And I'm like, you know, I remember we was talking about we were on a call, and what we named a podcast for you. What did we say? I was just trying to mind my business. That's what we said. We're gonna get you I was just trying to mind my business.
That's all I be doing.
I'm just trying to find my business. But then y'all went and did. but I would love to revisit another conversation with you. You brought up I would like to get specific on some things. And there are a few topics that we touched on that that they could all benefit from deeper dives. And so I would love to come back to you so that we can really go deep on. And there's one coming to mind right now, but you know, I'm gonna sit with it for a little bit. But because we can.
Now you got me wondering. See. Send me a message.
Yeah, because it's got to formulate. But Brittani, I love you.
I love you too, sis.
Thank you so much. So much. I know you talk about coming back to Black spaces to get filled. That's really my intention for this space. Like I said, that cup. And so I know I'm overflowing from some of the comments. I see other people have been getting blessed on today as well. So yes, thank you for coming through, and we're gonna revisit this conversation. We've been dive into the deep end on some stuff. So, but anyway,
I appreciate you having this space. It's so important that, and it's and Jamie, it's a teachable moment for me, and I hopefully for anybody who has seen this conversation or any of your previous conversations or future ones, that sometimes you just got to create the space. Sometimes you just got to go do it, you know. And I'm learning that from you, because I often have a zillion ideas running around in my mind about what I want to do. And as you do in your professional work, as you do in just your life, sometimes you just got to create the thing and go. And so I appreciate you for that. I really do.
Thank you for saying so, because I do. I be in these streets. I be in these streets like, because you get the idea coming, like, let's do it. I'll be running ahead sometimes. And sometimes I got to, go in reverse. But, listen, like you said, just do it and then course correct. But you said this earlier, like, who's to say you're not qualified? Listen, we're gonna go out on this last comment. My girl Shanae said, "I'm in tears as my soul."
Don't say that. I'm a crier. I will sit and cry. Don't do that.
This is my sister from way back. She said she knows I'm sensitive. This is my sister from back in San Diego. We were pregnant together, and so we both have our babies, our 17-year-old babies. So to have her
let's do that conversation. Black mamas.
Okay, all right, Black mamas, we could do that. Okay, we finna look at the calendar because yes, we can
Love
have that
you. Love
conversation.
y'all.
Yes. All right. Love y'all. Y'all keep an eye out for the next one. I believe next week we are going to have our reschedule. Last week was supposed to be Moon Vibes magazine, but for the sake of self-care, family was having a time. And so we said not on today. So we are going to revisit that next week. Moon Vibes magazine is the publication that you talk about starting it, right? That was initiated by my daughter, my 17-year-old daughter. She came to me and my sister and was like, "Hey, can we make a magazine?" And we said, "Okay, sure."
Love
So
it.
the magazine is finished. We've got the digital and physical print, and so we're gonna go through and have a conversation about it next week. So y'all come through, check us out, coaching conversations. But yeah, y'all have a great weekend.